Those who really make the progress are putting in about 8 to 10 hours a week working on their business rather than in their business. You're listening to the Profit by Design podcast, episode 5. You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question. What has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling, the business psychologist and your co-host on the Profit by Design podcast. Weekly, my co-host Mike Bruno and I bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real-life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire. As we dive in, I want to give a shout out to our profit designers who've been helping us as we launch the podcast. You know who you are. If you've shared our podcast with your friends, I so appreciate it. Our downloads are much higher than is expected for a brand new podcast. And Mike and I know that has to do with you, our listeners, sharing the podcast. And we really appreciate that. So please keep it up. I also want to thank those of you who've been giving us feedback about the show. Christine Era, Steve Bousquet, Donna Lyons, Rodrigo Ladaga, and Stacy Seguin. You've been telling us what hits home for you and even some of the changes you're making, which just gets Mike and I even more psyched about creating these episodes from week to week. And some of you have given us feedback on the audio, and I want to let you know we are actively working on improving that because audio quality is very important to us. We want you to have an exceptional listening experience. So keep the feedback coming. You can email Mike and I directly at sabrinaandmike@profitbydesignpodcast.com or join our conversation over in the Profit by Design Facebook group. So Mike isn't able to be here with us today. And on today's episode, I'm going to do an Ask Dr. Sabrina segment to address a listener question that came in. I imagine this listener's question is one that you can probably relate with. So here's the question. Dr. Sabrina, I hear you talking about taking time off from my business. That 4-week vacation sounds so good. But honestly, I can't even imagine that. Even though it sounds really good to me, I'm working 60 hours a week or more most weeks, and I can't seem to get a grip or get ahead on anything. I know I should be implementing systems and hiring better team and paying attention to where we're losing money and doing something about it, but I just keep spinning my wheels. Most days, I feel like I'm playing the whack-a-mole game, running around from one problem to the next. So what advice can you give me? What can I do? So first off, I want to just acknowledge that most of our clients who work with us start out right where you are. Your business is running you instead of you running your business. And I've worked with hundreds, maybe even thousands by now, of business owners over the last 13 or 14 years. And I've been really curious because some of them make a lot of progress and some keep spinning their wheels. And so about 6 years ago, I started paying attention to what's the difference? What are those who pull out of the business running you and start getting that ability to take time away from the business and have the business function without them? What are they doing differently? And what I noticed is those who really make the progress are putting in about 8 to 10 hours a week working on their business rather than in their business. Now, I know what you're thinking, Sabrina, I'm already working 60 plus hours a week, and now you're telling me I should add 8 or 10 more to that so I can do the work on my business? I'm fried. I don't have the mental space for that. So actually, no, that's not what I'm telling you. What I am sharing, though, is that's a target for you to be aiming for. But we've got to start small with first you just recapturing an hour or 2 a week. And then after a few weeks of that, recapturing 2 or 3 hours. That happens with interrupting your pattern of behavior. So let me just explain something psychologically about what's going on. So when we are running around playing the whack-a-mole games in our business, we're in a stress mode. We are in fight or flight, and there's adrenaline coursing through our bodies. That is not a place to make well thought out decisions from. I mean, that's a place of burnout because we can't sustain that for an extended period of time. Our bodies are not meant to sustain that. That's supposed to be something that is a survival mechanism that kicks in when we're in danger. And if we operate like we are in a constant state of threat or under attack, we are just completely undermining our ability to make the good decisions that we need to be making in our businesses to start moving things forward. And so that's why I'm always telling people, go take a vacation. You need a break. And it's not just because, yes, it feels really good to go sit somewhere and relax, put your feet up for a while, zone out. It's because we have to interrupt that fight or flight reaction. And I also want to acknowledge if you've been in this fight or flight mode for an extended period of time, which I know many of you have, it feels very uncomfortable to stop and do nothing. And so even when we stop and do nothing, we tend to fill our time with things that keep us stressed and keep us reacting, like social media or texting, or just keeping our phones nearby and responding to the fires that keep coming in from our businesses. What's happening here is it's going to feel awkward and uncomfortable to even just put your phone down and step away, even for an hour from the business and not be constantly available. So just expect that that's going to be awkward and prepare for it because it's going to happen. And I want you to know that if you keep making the same old choices and getting pulled into the same old behaviors, you're going to keep getting the same results in your business over time. So the question becomes, how do we interrupt this pattern? And first, we need to dig a little deeper and uncover what's underneath this pattern of behavior when you're running around in your business, putting out one fire after the other. It's a very reactive pattern. So there's underlying reasons that you're in that pattern, and it may differ a little bit for each of you. But as I've studied this over the years, one thing I've noticed is that there's a few broad mindsets and false beliefs that tend to drive this behavior for us entrepreneurs. So the first is a mindset, and we call it the Superman or Wonder Woman mindset. And if that's you, where you feel like you're needing to swoop in and save the day for your clients, your customers, your team members, that everything's on you to fix, I want you to know it is time to change your underoos. You don't have to swoop in and save the day for everybody. In fact, when we do, all we are doing is making our businesses more and more dependent on us. And if you need a reminder on this, just go back and listen to Mike Bruno in episode 2 as he talks about this. Now, another underlying belief that's a false belief is, I've got to fix this now. Meaning like we feel like every problem that comes in, we have to address immediately, or that there's not some better time in the future to address it. That's a false belief. Another false belief is, I've just got to work through this crunch time. It will get better. And we keep kind of kicking the can down the road like someday it's going to get better, but that someday never comes. Another false belief that I buy into, and I know some of you listening probably buy into this too, when a problem comes up in the business, it's really easy to get into busy mode and just say, I don't have time to create a system to solve this problem. It'll take too long. I'll just solve it right now and keep moving. Meanwhile, that same problem comes up again next week, and the week after, and a few months again later. And it takes a lot of time to solve those problems, where we'd just be better off if we'd stop in the moment and figure out, what system could I put in place that would keep this problem from happening again. And another false belief that causes us to overwork is that belief of, I can just do more and more. Somehow I'll make it work, which leads us to overcommitting. And if that's going on, I really encourage you to step back and remember your priorities and what's important to you. So where to start? I'm really convinced it begins with getting back to the basics, getting ourselves out of survival mode by reprioritizing. So that means remembering why you're in business in the first place, the freedom that you want to have with your business, and the lifestyle that you're trying to create. So you might start with asking yourself some questions like, how can I get my business back on track? And my favorite question that I asked myself at the beginning of this year is, what do I need to do right now to free up 20% of my time in the coming year? Now, I have more for you on this, including a webinar I've created that's a deep dive into how to make that shift from working in the business to working on the business and actually make your time worth $10,000 an hour as the entrepreneur in your business. But before we get to that, let's take a short break here and hear about our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Tap the Potential, the home of How to Hire the Best and the 4-Week Vacation Program. Tap the Potential is my coaching and consulting company, and we specialize in transforming businesses into highly profitable, great places to work, and then sending the owners on a 4-week vacation to celebrate that. You can learn more by visiting tapthepotential.com. Our other sponsors include Contractor Business Solutions and the Small Business Consulting Group. All right, I mentioned that I have a webinar that I want to share with you that's a deeper dive into how to make that switch from working in the business to working on the business. And I'm going to share that with you in just a minute. Before we go there, I want to share a perspective with you that I was introduced to about 2 years ago, and I've been studying time management ever since I started my business, because when I started my business, I had a brand new baby, my firstborn daughter, and I only wanted to work about 25 hours a week. I really wanted to spend a lot of time with her. So I was very focused on how to be as efficient as I could possibly be. And I had a lot of clients, overworked business owners, who were trying to figure out how to be more efficient and get more done. So that's what really drove my interest in studying time management all these years. But I've been studying that for so long. It wasn't until a couple of years ago that I was introduced to context switching. And I wish somebody would have told me this, 14 years ago, back when I started my business, because it would have made a huge difference. So let me share this with you. Context switching was developed by Gerald Weinberg in the early 90s. And recently, Todd Herman has created a really good YouTube video about this, and we'll link to it in the show notes. But the reason that context switching is so important is that so many of us are jumping from one thing to the next in our businesses. So by now, unless you've been hiding under a rock, you've probably heard before that multitasking is not effective. We all know we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be switching from email to working on a project on a Word document and then checking our text messages and then jumping onto Facebook. That's terribly unproductive. But context switching is about how unproductive it is to have multiple projects going simultaneously. I am one who loves a good project, and I have lots of fun projects that I'm working on. But a few years ago, I realized I wasn't getting the traction that I needed on those projects, and it was because I was doing too much context switching. So in my world, what that was looking like is I would have a few hours on Monday blocked to work on my big project. And then I would do a little bit of client prep work to get ready for the week. Then I would answer emails and respond to a few phone calls. And then I would have an hour or so left at the end of the day. And I would try to get a little more work done on that project. But that time I was really tired and I wasn't getting anything done on that project. Then Tuesday would hit and I would get busy with client work. And then Wednesday I would try to make a little more progress on that project or a different project. And so on and so on. I wasn't getting anywhere and things were just dragging out and dragging out. So that's when I learned about context switching. So let me share this with you. If we have one day in front of us, say it's Monday, and you've blocked out 8 hours and you're thinking, great, I've got 8 hours I'm going to work on this project. And that's the only thing that you do. You have a 0% loss of time to context switching. However, if you have 2 projects that you have going that day, you might think, okay, great. Each one is going to get 4 hours and there won't be any loss to context switching. But actually, that's not the case at all. You will have a 20% loss to context switching. So just think about that for a minute. If you're working on 2 projects simultaneously, you're only getting about 40% of your time per project. And each time you're switching context, you're losing a 10% per project loss, or a total of 20% loss per project. Now, what is happening is psychologically, each time we jump from one thing to the next, we're having to recalibrate. And for our major projects, that's a significant amount of recalibration, because we have to remember, okay, where was I in this project? What was I working on? What was I trying to figure out? What do I need to do next? And you're taking that time to refresh. But it also throws us out of our zone of flow. And this is where, when we work on something for an extended period of time, we can really get into a zone of flow where we're totally focused. We lose a sense of time, and we're making a lot of forward movement and momentum on that particular project. Now, most of us don't just have 2 projects that we're working on at any given time. Most entrepreneurs that I know of have 4 or 5 projects going at any given time. So let's just look at what happens when you have just 3 projects going. So let's say you have a 10-hour day and you're going to work on 3 projects. You're going to have a 40% loss of that 10-hour day due to context switching. So a 40% loss is 4 hours out of your 10-hour day that's getting lost to context switching. And that means that each of those 3 projects is only getting 20% of your time. So with that understanding, can you start to see why you can get to the end of a year and you can think, wow, I really have not much has changed over the course of this year. And that's just because you've been spread really thin. So when I learned about context switching, it did a few things for me. It got me very clear on, I'm going to only pick one major project per quarter to move forward. And that's part of the reason it took us a year to launch this podcast, is because I wanted to be able to devote a significant amount of time to it. I knew it would take a good amount of time to launch a podcast. I didn't want to have competing projects that would interfere with my ability to focus on it. And so I would encourage you to start thinking about that for yourself. Like, if you could only move one big rock forward in your business between now and the end of the year, what would have the most impact for you? And that I want to give you a little bit of help figuring out. So a couple of years ago, I created a webinar called How to Make Your Time Worth $10,000 an Hour. And I created this webinar because I saw so many of us spinning our wheels when it comes to working on our business. And I realized that really what we do when we try to work on our business is we're bouncing around from one thing to the next, and we're never really getting any momentum anywhere. And so I wanted to show you what are the highest value activities that you can be engaging in as an entrepreneur that will get you the most traction in your business as you're trying to get out of this 60, 70-hour a week survival trap that you're in. And so that's what I've included in the How to Make Your Time Worth $10,000 an Hour webinar. It's a free webinar. You can get access to it by going to 10kanhour.com. 10kanhour.com. So it's 10K anhour.com. If you can't find that, you can also get access to the webinar. Mike and I have put it on the Profit by Design podcast page, on the resources page there for you. So there's a link directly to it. And what you'll get when you register for this webinar is we'll send you a chart of $10,000 an hour activities, and it shows you the difference between a $10 an hour, a $50 an hour, a $100 an hour activity on up to a $10,000 an hour activity. So you can easily look down that chart and see what level in your business you're working from. And in my experience, most of the entrepreneurs that I share this with, when they're in their early phases of working with us, they're usually in the $50 to $100 an hour range. And so what we work on at that point is what I call trading up. So let's get rid of those $50, $100 an hour activities, move those down to somebody else in the organization and free up your time so that you can start working on the $1,000 an hour activities and then moving on up to the $10,000 an hour activities. And a lot of our clients have been doing that and they've had a lot of success. But they've all started out where so many of you listening to this right now are, you're feeling like, boy, I don't even know if I could free up an hour of my time. Well, you're listening to the podcast, so I feel pretty confident you can free up at least 30 or 40 minutes of your time. I don't think it'd be too much of a stretch to get you listening to a webinar for an hour, and then next week, a couple of more hours, and so on. So I hope that's helpful to you. So in closing today, I want to share a big takeaway that I got from ProfitCon a couple of weeks ago. And it was the question of, imagine what your business could be like a year from now if you implement just one system a week. Boy, that got me thinking, because quite honestly, one of the things that I'm really good at is creating content, and I love coming up with things that will help our clients move their businesses forward. And I spend a lot of time in that zone. And one area of my business that gets neglected is automation. Simply because it feels like, oh gosh, I have to learn another platform or another computer program, and I just don't feel like I want to do that. So what I've been paying attention to in my own business is what areas of my business can I automate that will not just free up my time, but free up other people in our business, free up their time so that they can focus on higher level activities. So that's been my commitment from ProfitCon, is each week I'm putting in place one system a week and looking at how to automate it. So I hope that's helpful to you. So Profit Designers, I'd love to hear from you on this topic. Do you relate? What hit home for you? How will you use this information to make more intentional and sustainable decisions in your own business? Join our conversation in the Profit by Design podcast Facebook group. Share your thoughts on today's conversation. Ask questions. Let us know what you want to hear about next or what you want us to dig into deeper. Visit our website at profitbydesignpodcast.com to access resources from our sponsors and tools we've created for you. Subscribe to the show on whatever platform you listen to. So if you listen on Android or if you listen on Overcast, there's a subscribe button there. Just hit it. If it's Apple Podcasts, there's a subscribe button there too. So just go ahead and hit that so you always get a notification when we release a new episode. And finally, share this with a friend if you know a friend who'd benefit from it. We really appreciate that. This is real life business. Keep your chin up and keep moving forward. You got this. Till next time.